The New Terra colony had been her home for 3 years, but the mysterious wilderness beyond the safety perimeter still called to her adventurous spirit. Beside her, her younger brother Finn kicked at the red dirt, his freckled face scrunched, in concentration as he studied the alien flora. "Mom said we shouldn't go past the marker stones," Finn whispered, his voice barely audible over the gentle hum of the colony's energy fence behind them. "We're not going past them," Kira replied, though her eyes were already fixed on the shimmering forest beyond the boundary. "We're just exploring right up to the edge." Their friend, Marcus Rivera, appeared through the morning mist, his dark hair damp with dew, and his tablet clutched tightly in his hands. At 13, he was the oldest of their group and took his role as the responsible one seriously. "The weather sensors show clear skies for the next 6 hours," he announced, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "But Kira, you know what Dr. Reeves said about the indigenous species. They're not just animals, they're intelligent and they're territorial." Kira rolled her eyes. "The apex predators haven't been seen near the colony in months. The peace treaty is holding." She paused, studying the towering trees that marked the beginning of the Forbidden Zone. "Besides, we're not crossing over. We're just learning." The 3 children had grown up hearing whispers about the apex predators, the native species that had initially contested human settlement on New Terra. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, when fully grown, with sleek, muscled bodies covered in adaptive camouflage fur, they possessed intelligence that rivaled humans and hunting instincts. That had evolved over millennia. The adults spoke of them with a mixture of respect and fear, maintaining the careful peace agreement that kept both species separated by clearly marked boundaries. As they approached the perimeter, Finn suddenly grabbed Kira's arm. "Look," he breathed, pointing toward a cluster of crystalline formations near the boundary stones. "Are those eggs?" Marcus raised his tablet, its scanning function humming softly. "Negative on eggs, but the bio readings are interesting. High mineral content, possibly grown rather than formed naturally." He looked up, his scientist's curiosity overriding his caution. "These could be some kind of communication markers." Kira knelt beside the formations, careful not to touch them. Each crystal was about the size of her fist, translucent and pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light. "They're beautiful," she murmured, "like they're alive." A rustling in the undergrowth beyond the boundary made all 3 children freeze. Marcus's tablet beeped softly, detecting movement in the forest. Through the dappled sunlight, they caught glimpses of sleek forms moving between the trees. Not the lumbering gait of the adult apex predators they'd seen in documentary footage, but something smaller, more playful. "Cubs," Finn whispered, his fear melting into wonder. "They're just cubs." 3 young apex predators emerged from the forest, their fur a mottled pattern of green and brown that shifted subtly with their emotions. They were perhaps half the size of adults, but still imposing, each about the size of a large dog, with intelligent golden eyes and graceful, powerful builds. They moved with the confident curiosity of youth, unencumbered by the caution that marked their elders. The largest of the cubs, whose fur bore distinctive silver markings along its spine, approached the boundary stones with bold steps. It paused, head tilted, studying the human children with obvious intelligence. Kira felt her heart racing, but not with fear, with excitement. This was the moment she'd dreamed of since arriving on New Terra. "Stay very still," Marcus warned, though his voice carried wonder rather than alarm. The silver-marked cub made a soft chirping sound, almost like a question. Kira, acting on pure instinct, made a similar sound back. The cub's ears perked forward, and it took another step closer to the boundary. The other 2 cubs followed, their movements fluid and curious. For a long moment, the 2 groups simply observed each other across the invisible line that separated their worlds. Then, in a gesture that would later be remembered as the first step toward a new kind of understanding, the silver-marked cub extended one paw toward the boundary stones, palm open, a gesture remarkably similar to a human offering a handshake. Kira looked at her brother and Marcus, seeing her own excitement reflected in their eyes. The future of two species hung in the balance of this moment, and they were too young to understand the magnitude of what was happening. They only knew that for the first time, they were face to face with the legendary apex predators, and instead of fear, they felt only wonder. The standoff lasted only moments, but to Kira, it felt like an eternity. The silver-marked cub's paw remained extended, a bridge across the species divide that had defined life on New Terra for the past decade. Behind her, she could hear Finn's rapid breathing and the soft whir of Marcus's tablet, recording every second of this historic encounter. "What do I do?" Kira whispered, her voice barely audible. "Follow your instincts," Marcus replied, his scientific training warring with his human caution. "But be ready to run." Kira took a deep breath and slowly extended her own hand toward the boundary. The cub's golden eyes tracked her movement, and she could see intelligence there, not the simple awareness of an animal, but something deeper, more complex. As their hands drew closer, she noticed the cub's palm was warm, almost human-like in texture, with subtle ridges that might have been natural grip patterns. The moment their palms touched, Kira felt a slight tingling sensation, as if the cub's bioelectric field was somehow communicating with her own nervous system. The cub's eyes widened, and it made a soft, melodic sound that reminded her of wind chimes. Without thinking, she hummed back, matching the tone as closely as she could. The effect was immediate. The other two cubs stepped forward, their body language shifting from cautious to excited. The smallest one, whose fur had a distinctive blue-green tint, began making rapid chittering sounds while bouncing on its hind legs. The third cub, marked with intricate gold patterns, approached the boundary stones and began arranging the crystal formations into a new pattern. "They're trying to communicate," Finn said, his voice filled with awe. "Look at how they're moving the crystals." Marcus aimed his tablet at the crystal arrangement, his analytical mind racing. "The pattern. It's not random. There's a mathematical sequence here. Fibonacci progression, but modified." He looked up at Kira, excitement overriding his usual caution. "Kira, I think they're showing us they understand complex mathematical concepts." The silver-marked cub, whom Kira had begun thinking of as Silver, withdrew its paw and began making gestures with both arms, sweeping motions that seemed to encompass the forest, the colony, and the sky above. The other cubs joined in, creating what appeared to be a complex pantomime. "They're telling us about their world," Kira realized, watching the graceful movements. "Silver is showing us the forest and—" She paused, studying the blue-green cub's motions. "That one is showing us water, running water." Finn stepped closer to the boundary, his earlier fear completely forgotten. "Can we show them about our world too?" Without waiting for an answer, he began his own pantomime, pointing to the colony behind them and making building motions with his hands. The cubs watched intently, their heads tilting in perfect synchronization. When Finn mimed the motion of their transport shuttles, the gold-marked cub made an excited chirping sound and began drawing patterns in the dirt with its claws. Marcus studied the drawings through his tablet's camera. "Those aren't random scratches," he said slowly. "They're star charts. Look, that's the constellation Orion, and that's the Southern Cross. They know about space travel." The realization hit all three children simultaneously. The apex predators weren't just intelligent, they were scientifically advanced, possibly even more so than the human colonists. The peace treaty hadn't been signed with primitive natives, but with a species that had chosen to live in harmony with their natural environment while maintaining sophisticated knowledge of the universe around them. Silver began making more complex gestures, and Kira found herself responding instinctively, her hands moving in patterns that felt strangely familiar. The communication was becoming more fluid, more natural, as if some ancient part of her brain was remembering how to speak in the universal language of gesture and emotion. "Kira," Marcus said urgently, "look at your tablet readings." She glanced at the device clipped to her belt. The biorhythm sensors that normally tracked her heart rate and stress levels were showing something unprecedented. Her brainwave patterns were synchronizing with electromagnetic readings from the other side of the boundary. The cubs weren't just communicating with gestures, they were somehow harmonizing with the human children on a neurological level. "We need to document this," Marcus said, his voice tight with excitement and responsibility. "This is first contact, real first contact. The adults need to know that communication is possible." But even as he spoke, Kira felt a growing reluctance to break the spell of this moment. The cubs had approached them as equals, not as threats or curiosities. For the first time since arriving on New Terra, she felt like she was truly home, not just in the human colony, but on the planet itself. The sound of voices in the distance made all 6 young beings freeze, human voices calling their names, growing closer. The cub's body language shifted immediately, becoming more alert, more cautious. Silver looked directly at Kira and made a soft, questioning sound. "We have to go," Finn whispered, though his eyes remained fixed on the cubs. "But we'll come back, right?" Kira nodded, placing her hand on the boundary stone. Silver approached and placed its paw on the same stone, and for a moment the crystal formation between them pulsed with brighter light. It felt like a promise over. The following weeks, the 3 human children found themselves drawn back to the boundary stones, like moths to flame. Each secret meeting with the cubs deepened their understanding and strengthened their bond, but also increased the weight of the secret they carried. Kira had taken to calling the cubs by names that reflected their unique markings: Silver, Sage, the blue-green one, and Aurelius, the gold-patterned one. The cubs, in turn, had developed distinct vocalizations for each human child: a melodic trill for Kira, a gentle clicking for Finn, and a rhythmic hum for Marcus. "Today's communication attempt was remarkable," Marcus whispered as they gathered. In their usual spot near the boundary, his tablet now contained hours of recordings, detailed behavioral observations, and preliminary linguistic analysis that would have made xenobiologists weep with envy. Aurelius is showing mathematical concepts that suggest their species has advanced geometric understanding, and the way Sage responds to environmental data. "They're not just smart," Finn interrupted, his voice filled with wonder. "They're wise, like they understand things we haven't even thought of yet." Kira nodded, but her attention was focused on Silver, who had begun exhibiting new behaviors. The young predator had started bringing objects from the forest: interesting stones, unusual plants, even small technological devices that looked distinctly non-human in origin. Today, Silver approached the boundary carrying something that made all 3 children gasp. "Is that what I think it is?" Marcus asked, his tablet almost slipping from his hands. Silver placed a small, translucent device on the ground near the boundary stones. It was roughly the size of a smartphone, but its surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. Symbols appeared and disappeared across its surface, some recognizable as mathematical equations, others completely alien. Aurelius approached with his own device, slightly larger and pulsing with soft golden light. Sage followed, carrying what appeared to be a living plant that responded to touch by changing colors and emitting soft musical tones. "They're showing us their technology," Kira breathed. This is their version of our tablets, isn't it? Silver made a complex series of gestures, then activated the device. Suddenly, the air above the boundary stones shimmered, and a three-dimensional hologram appeared, a detailed map of the forest, the colony, and the surrounding continent. The image was so precise that Kira could see individual buildings in the human settlement and specific trees in the predator territory. They've been studying us, Marcus realized, his scientific mind racing. Just like we've been studying them, but their technology is so much more advanced than ours. Aurelius activated his device, and the hologram expanded to show star charts, orbital mechanics, and what appeared to be historical data about the planet's geological development. The cubs weren't just intelligent, they were part of a scientifically advanced civilization that had chosen to live in harmony with their world rather than dominate it. Why are they showing us this? Finn asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Sage's musical plant began playing a complex melody, and the cubs started moving in patterns that reminded Kira of a dance. The other cubs joined in, creating a performance that was part communication, part art, and part something entirely beyond human understanding. They're sharing their culture, Kira said softly. They trust us. The weight of that trust settled on the three children like a mantle. They were no longer just curious kids exploring forbidden territory. They were ambassadors, representatives of their species, in a relationship that could change the future of both civilizations. Over the following days, their meetings became more structured. The cubs taught them about their forest home, showing them which plants were safe to eat, which streams ran cleanest, and which areas to avoid during the seasonal migrations of larger predators. In return, the human children shared their knowledge of technology, mathematics, and the stars beyond New Terra. Finn discovered he had a natural talent for understanding the cubs' gestural language, often translating concepts that Marcus and Kira couldn't quite grasp. Marcus found that his scientific training allowed him to appreciate the sophisticated environmental management techniques the cubs' society employed. And Kira became the emotional bridge, somehow able to sense the cubs' feelings and intentions in ways that transcended language. But their secret was becoming harder to keep. The cubs' parents, massive, powerful beings who watched from the forest shadows, were clearly aware of the meetings. Dr. Reeves had begun asking questions about the children's frequent absences, and the colony's security systems had detected unusual energy readings near the boundary stones. "We can't keep this hidden much longer," Marcus said during one particularly intense meeting. "The adults are going to find out." Silver approached the boundary stone and placed both paws on its surface. The crystal formation began to pulse with a rhythm that matched the cub's heartbeat, and somehow Kira understood what Silver was trying to communicate. "They know," she said quietly. "The adult predators know about our meetings, and they're curious. They want to understand what we've been doing." Aurelius activated his device, showing a new hologram. This one depicting adult predators and human colonists meeting in the same peaceful manner as the cubs and children. It was a vision of possibility, a future where both species could coexist openly. "They're asking us to help make that happen," Finn realized. "They want us to be the bridge between our peoples." The responsibility was enormous, but as Kira looked at her brother and Marcus, she saw her own determination reflected in their faces. They had stumbled into first contact, but they had also discovered something precious, proof that friendship and understanding could transcend the boundaries between species. The next morning, they would have to make a choice. Continue their secret meetings or find the courage to reveal their friendship to the adults of both species. The future of two civilizations hung in the balance, and it rested in the hands of 3 human children and 3 predator cubs who had learned to trust each other. The decision came sooner than any of them expected. On a crisp morning in late autumn, as the children made their way to the boundary stones for what they planned to be their final secret meeting. They found themselves walking into a carefully orchestrated confrontation. Dr. Elena Reeves, the colony's chief xenobiologist, stood beside the boundary markers with a full security team. Her weathered face was a mixture of concern and fascination as she studied the energy readings on her instruments. Behind her, Colony Administrator James Park spoke quietly into his communication device, his words lost in the morning breeze. "Kira, Finn, Marcus," Dr. Reeves called out as the children approached, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been tracking their movements for days. "I think it's time we had a conversation." The children exchanged glances, their hearts racing. They had known this moment would come, but they weren't prepared for the reality of it. Kira stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "We haven't broken any laws," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "We never crossed the boundary." "No," Dr. Reeves agreed, "but you've been engaging in unauthorized contact with indigenous species. The energy readings from this area have been unprecedented." As if summoned by their voices, the cubs appeared at the forest edge, but they weren't alone. 3 adult apex predators emerged from the trees, their massive forms moving with fluid grace. Even at a distance, their intelligence was unmistakable. They observed the human gathering with the same careful attention that scientists might give to a fascinating experiment. The security team's weapons powered up with a soft whine, but Dr. Reeves raised her hand for them to hold position. "Nobody moves," she commanded. "Nobody acts aggressively. We're about to witness something unprecedented." Silver, Sage, and Aurelius approached the boundary stones, but their behavior was different from previous meetings. They moved with formal dignity, their gestures more deliberate, more ritualistic. They were no longer just curious cubs. They were representatives of their species, acting under the guidance of their elders. The largest adult predator, whose silver markings identified it as likely Silver's parent, stepped forward. It was magnificent, nearly 8 feet tall, with fur that shifted from deep green to silver gray, and eyes that held the wisdom of centuries. When it spoke, its voice was a rich, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Marcus's tablet, now openly displayed, translated the vocalizations in real time. The linguistic analysis software had been learning from weeks of recorded conversations, and while the translation was imperfect, the meaning was clear. "Young ones of the Star Path people, you have shown honor to our cubs. We would speak with your pack leaders." Administrator Park stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in his careful posture. "I am James Park, leader of the new Terra colony. These are Dr. Elena Reeves, our science coordinator, and security chief Martinez. We had no knowledge of the contact between our young people and yours." The adult predator's response rippled through the translation software. "Knowledge comes to those who seek wisdom. Your cubs seek wisdom. Our cubs teach wisdom. This is the way of growth." Dr. Reeves activated her own recording equipment, her scientific excitement barely contained. "Your species has maintained an advanced civilization while living in harmony with your environment. Our children seem to have discovered what our formal diplomatic channels could not, that true communication is possible between our peoples." Essay, second adult predator, whose golden markings matched Aurelius's patterns, gestured toward the crystal formations. As if responding to some unspoken command, the crystals began to pulse in complex patterns, creating a 3-dimensional holographic display that showed the history of both species on New Terra. The hologram revealed the truth that neither species had fully understood. The apex predators had been watching the human colonists for years, studying their technology, their social structures, their impact on the environment. They had been preparing for this moment, waiting for the right opportunity to establish genuine contact. Your cubs showed courage, the translation continued. They approached without fear, without weapons, without the burden of old cautions. They showed that coexistence is possible. Kira found her voice, speaking directly to the adult predators. Silver, Sage, and Aurelius have been teaching us about your world. We've been learning about each other, about mathematics and science, and friendship. The third adult predator, whose blue-green markings match Sage's coloring, made a sound that the translator rendered as something like gentle laughter. The young ones speak truths that the old ones forget. Growth comes from understanding, not from distance. Silver approached the boundary stones and began the familiar ritual of placing its paw on the crystal formation. But instead of stopping at the boundary, it stepped across, entering human territory for the first time. The security team tensed, but Dr. Reeves gestured for them to remain calm. The cub walked directly to Kira and extended its paw in the gesture that had begun their friendship. Kira knelt and accepted the gesture, feeling the familiar tingle of bioelectric communication. But this time, the sensation was stronger, more complex. She could sense not just Silver's emotions, but the approval and pride of the adult predators watching from the forest. "They're asking for formal recognition," Marcus said, his tablet displaying complex diplomatic protocols. "They want to establish official cultural exchange programs." Administrator Park looked at Dr. Reeves, who nodded slowly. "The potential for scientific collaboration alone would be invaluable," she said. "But more than that, we have an opportunity to create something unprecedented, a true partnership between spacefaring and indigenous civilizations." The largest adult predator approached the boundary but did not cross it. Instead, it placed its massive paw on the same crystal formation that Silver had activated, and the stones began to pulse with a new rhythm, faster, more complex, more hopeful. Through the translator, its words carried the weight of prophecy. "Let the young ones be the bridge between worlds. Let their friendship become the foundation of understanding between our peoples. Let this day be remembered as the beginning of a new path." As the sun reached its zenith, the boundary stones pulsed with brilliant light, and the crystal formations began to sing, a harmony that bridged the gap between human technology and predator natural communication. The sound was beautiful, complex, and filled with promise. The children had stumbled into first contact, but they had also discovered something far more valuable: the power of curiosity, courage, and friendship to transform the relationship between entire civilizations. 6 months after the first official contact, the boundary stones had become something entirely different, not barriers, but bridges. The crystal formations had grown into a complex network of communication nodes that allowed real-time translation between human and apex predator languages, while also serving as a hub for cultural and scientific exchange. Kira stood at the center of what was now called the Harmony Plaza, watching as human children and predator cubs played together in the midday sun. The scene would have been unimaginable a year ago. Young humans and apex predators chasing each other through obstacle courses, working together on art projects and sharing meals from both cultures. The integration program is exceeding all expectations, Dr. Reeves said, approaching with a datapad full of research notes. The children are developing communication skills that our linguists are still trying to understand. They're creating new forms of expression that incorporate both human and apex predator cultural elements. Finn ran past with Sage, both of them laughing as they raced toward a climbing structure that had been built collaboratively by both species. The structure itself was a marvel, combining human engineering with apex predator bioarchitecture, resulting in a living building that adapted to the needs of its users while maintaining perfect structural integrity. Marcus sat beneath one of the translated crystal formations, his tablet connected to an apex predator data node. Aurelius lay beside him, the two friends working together on a project that involved mapping the quantum communication networks that connected all living things. On New Terra, their research was already revolutionizing human understanding of consciousness and environmental interconnectedness. The adults are learning as much from the children as the children are learning from each other, Administrator Park observed, joining Dr. Reeves at the observation platform. The joint research projects are producing breakthrough discoveries in biotechnology, sustainable energy, and interspecies communication. Silva approached Kira, moving with the confident grace of a young adult. The cub had grown considerably over the past months, its silver markings now extending across its shoulders and down its arms in patterns that indicated its role as a cultural ambassador. When it spoke, its voice had deepened into rich, melodic tones that required no translation. "Kira, friend, the Council of Elders has reached a decision about the Deep Forest expedition," Silva said, using the carefully constructed hybrid language that had emerged from months of interaction. "They approve the joint exploration mission, but with conditions. The Deep Forest expedition was the next phase of human apex predator cooperation. The predators had revealed that their territory contained ruins of an ancient civilization, possibly the original inhabitants of New Terra, that held technologies and knowledge that could benefit both species. But the journey would require unprecedented trust and cooperation. "What conditions?" Kira asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "The expedition must be led by the young Bonds," Silver explained, "those who first crossed the boundary between our peoples. The elders believe that the ancient sites will only reveal their secrets to those who approach with the curiosity and openness of youth." Dr. Reeves raised her eyebrows. "They want the children to lead the expedition. That's highly irregular, but perfectly logical," Marcus called out, his enhanced hearing having caught the conversation. "We've been the most successful communicators between the species, and we've been preparing for this moment since our first meeting." The truth was that the children had been changed by their experiences. The constant interaction with apex predator consciousness had enhanced their pattern recognition abilities, their environmental awareness, and their capacity for non-verbal communication. They had become something new, not fully human, but not other than human either. They were the first generation of true New Terrans. "The expedition leaves at first light," Silva continued. "We will travel to the crystal caves, where the ancient ones stored their knowledge. If we can unlock their secrets, we may learn how to extend our cooperation beyond this world." The implications were staggering. The ancient civilization had apparently achieved interstellar communication and possibly even travel, but had chosen to remain on New Terra. Understanding their motivations and methods could transform humanity's approach to space exploration and colonization. As the sun began to set, the 3 human children and 3 apex predator cubs gathered at the original boundary stones, now surrounded by the bustling activity of the Harmony Plaza, but still marking the spot where their friendship had begun. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Kira asked, looking at each of her friends in turn.